So, I am joined by a very special guest today, Peter Cunningham, who's the Director of Marketing at Buyapowa. So, fun fact about Peter, we actually met in 2015, all those years ago. There was no AI, there was no TikTok, there was no Snapchat, and my colleague over there recording probably wasn't even born. So, this goes against all sorts of child labor laws, which we don't abide by here at Zero Calorie Marketing. Firstly, Peter, another fun fact about Peter, which I just discovered, is he has like a semi-photographic memory.
Yeah, it's something that's actually been quite useful for work and also studying. That as long as I concentrate, and normally do that by writing notes, and sometimes my handwriting has got worse as I've got older, but if I do that, I can remember the things of the meeting. I can do the meeting notes very quickly. It's quite interesting right now because our CEO is getting very into AI, and he's got some very cool tech which listens to all your meetings and summarizes it very, very efficiently.
Oh, wow.
So I always thought I had a bit of a natural advantage because I was able to do bullet notes of like the meeting very, very quickly afterwards and be very accurate.
Who needs AI when you have Peter?
Exactly.
Firstly, Peter, I know you, but the camera doesn't know you. So who are you and what do you do?
So I'm marketing director of Buyapowa. I'm coming up for 10 years there.
Yeah.
So Buyapowa is a company. We do what we call now reward marketing. So that involves three different parts. So it's referral marketing. So we work with enterprise business only. Yeah. So typically B2B2C. We have some B2B clients, but you've got three parts. Referral marketing is you get your customers, your past customers, or your employees to refer you. They've had a good experience with you. You offer them an incentive to refer a friend, and you can drive customer acquisition. We have another one, which is reward payout. So any circumstance you want to pay out a reward to someone, maybe they've been a good customer 2 years, maybe it's their birthday, maybe it's you made a mistake and you want to say sorry, or maybe it's win back, whatever. We have a platform that can automate that whole process. So you don't have people in the office with spreadsheets trying to send out vouchers. We can also see if they've been redeemed. And the third part of that we have is partner marketing. So the way I always think of it is if you were a pet insurer, and we work with lots of insurance companies, you might want to work with, say, Purina, because Purina makes pet food.
Yeah.
And you could tap in not only to Purina's customers, but their friends.
Yeah.
So
before this becomes a complete Buyapowa sponsored podcast, which we hope it will at some point, we want to get to know you, Peter, and get to know how you got to where you got to, because you've got quite an interesting background because you actually studied law when you were at uni.
So I actually studied history first time. I studied history with a minor in economics. Like a lot of people, when you get to 21, you don't really know what you're going to do. And I had about 4 different options. And I thought I need 5. And a lot of my friends were doing the conversion into law. Yeah. So I put law as number 5 just to have 5. And at the time my father did, which was a lot of good fathers did, was introduced me to a lot of people, quite senior people. And I spoke for, my father was a diplomat, we were in Germany at the time. I met the British ambassador in Bonn, very senior people in the UN, lawyers. And they all told me, don't do any of those 4. Do law. And I said, why should I do law? And they said, well, if you do law, you can do anything, which I suddenly found out was not quite true. It's very good to be a lawyer, legal recruitment. I found out what they meant afterwards, because actually what they meant was once you've had a successful law career, you could often go into politics or you do UN or something like that. So I found myself in a profession, I wasn't bad at it, I just had no passion for it, and it took a lot from me. So I wanted to do something different. I ended up doing an MBA. Since then, I've worked, since 2003, so 20 years, I've worked in online businesses or internet technology. And that's been across B2B, B2C, B2B2C. So I've seen all the different mix.
So essentially, a lot of the marketers that we've been speaking to here on this season specifically, they've kind of followed different paths into where they got to where they are right now. It seems marketing is one of these kind of roles where you can pretty much come from any discipline and make it your own. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't. What I'd say is that marketing keeps opening up new avenues, like new technologies. So I always remember, I used to go to Web Analytics Wednesdays a lot, and I was talk to people. So how did you get into web analytics? And this is not an unusual story. I was an actor or an actress, not very successful, got a part-time job in an agency, and this thing called analytics came along, and someone said, who wants to volunteer to be the analytics person? I put my hand up and became the analytics person. So new technologies always open up opportunities. The other thing I'd say is everyone thinks they're a marketer. Everyone's a marketer at heart. Everyone watches, a TV and sees an ad and thinks they can be a marketer and they have a view on marketing. It's a deceivingly difficult profession. It's very, I think, easy to be mediocre at marketing. It's very difficult to be good. So I think coming to marketing with different backgrounds is great, but you need to put a lot of effort, a lot of study, a lot of self-study. You need constantly learning.
Honing your craft, essentially.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love about marketing, and particularly so I've worked with startups, growth businesses, turnarounds, internationalization. Never actually worked with a VC backed, but I've worked with everything else, investment trust, pension funds, high net worth. So the same kind of thing, high paced, fast moving. You've always got to learn something.
Marketers, obviously, every single marketer I speak to usually has around 50 emails in their inbox before even they get out of bed, or maybe even more.
I would say yes. As a marketer, we're quite often responsible for those emails. So we work with enterprise businesses. So we work across industries like insurance, utilities, telecoms, gambling, some financial services, some large retail. And I go quite often to conferences or events, and I speak to the people who, are our clients or could be our clients. And they tell me that they get 750 emails a day.
Oh, wow.
Now, my suspicion is it's less than 750, but it feels like 750. Yeah. So it's one of the challenges of being a marketer today is every channel is saturated. Yeah. People are telling me they're moving off LinkedIn because they're getting bombarded with message on LinkedIn. So as a marketer, you're fighting against the behavior of the worst player in your business. So the person who's sending untargeted spam messages to every single attendee at an event when only 10 were relevant is spoiling the experience for all the other people there. Same with your inbox. So yeah, I'd say I get a couple hundred emails a day. If I open my spam filter, it's actually quite impressive to see how efficient your spam filter is. It's not any real spam, it's newsletters I used to read and stopped opening.
Oh God, LinkedIn newsletters is the bane of my life, honestly. And it used to be, it was quite novel at the beginning, in terms of, this is quite insightful. I follow this person, so I want to hear about their views about X, Y, Z. But they've kind of weaponized it and made it into almost like a purely sales channel. So that's part and parcel of the game, I guess. I want to get straight in because these are the questions that we kind of sourced for you. You have been in marketing for a while. Right now, here in 2023, going into 2024, what are the most important trends in marketing today?
Okay, it's impossible to answer this question without saying AI. So AI is beginning to percolate into all types of marketing. So everything from find me ideas, help me draft a blog, help me draft an email. Can you do some competitive research on the market space? Can you write me a white paper? Then you've got the applications like, better targeting, how to make your website. So AI, and it's only just beginning. And it's still, there's still a lot of hallucination, there's still a lot of issues with it, but the power is there to be seen. So that is how do you incorporate AI into a business? And then you're thinking, my CEO keeps saying our competitors were doing this, so we need to do it.
Yeah.
The other one that's huge right now is the cookie laws. They're all changing. So third-party cookies. Also, something that's personally affecting me right now is Google's very hard enforcement of GDPR.
Yeah.
So it's demanding that you have very visible, do you accept cookies? And if people don't accept the cookies, it's not tracking them. So I've lost 1/3 of my Google Analytics data. Luckily, I can see through some other sources I haven't lost that. So my first instinct was, oh my God, boss, I've lost 1/3 of the data. I've lost 1/3 of the traffic. But actually then we're able to work out, no, I hadn't.
So it's almost like you've got to be creative, not just in the approach to the content and creative output you put out, in the way you actually approach data from the inside.
Yeah, I think, so typically I've worked in the situation, we recorded data and we recorded trends and we have the same last month and the same month last year and 2 years before, and are we doing better, are we doing worse? Suddenly I can't compare that data because the cookies aren't collecting 1/3 of that data. So that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
So before you were reasonably confident in what Google Analytics told you, that people were coming to this page and converting and coming to this page and leaving. Now you're like, well, I'm only seeing 2/3 of the story. So that's a challenge. It's a challenge for anyone that uses cookies in their targeting, in their marketing, personalization, and things like that.
And who knows what challenges marketers will have next year, and actual rules and regulations, as well as new tools that will for sure come out. That leads me to the next question. How do you see the role of marketing changing in the future? With the caveat with that question is from what you've seen in the past. I guess you're a history man.
Yeah.
You to predict the future, you look at the past, right?
Yeah. So I'm a great believer that actually marketing won't change too much. So I think the fundamentals of marketing have remained the same over time and remain the same across B2B, B2C, in all different areas. So I will say the first challenge in marketing is awareness. It's, hey, yo, I exist. Because if you don't know I exist, I may as well not exist. So the first challenge is awareness. The next challenge is to understand who could use your solution and get them to understand they have a problem and that your solution can solve it. Because if they don't know that, they won't be looking for your solution or they won't understand what you're saying. And then if they know that they have a problem, they know you have that there is a solution, but they don't know you are one of the people that can provide it. Again, you may as well not exist. Then you've got your next challenge is to educate, then also just to remain at the top of mind when people get around to it, or if people are looking for your solution, they find you. So I think none of those fundamentals will change. It's awareness, brand recall, positioning. Some of the technology will change. AI is very interesting. I think AI will level the playing field in a lot of areas. So a lot of people that didn't have big budgets will be creating a lot of content. So the same way the email channel, when it first began, there wasn't too much email in your inbox.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's flooded.
Yeah.
So maybe content marketing is going to become flooded. So the question is, how do you find the good from the bad? Or the good, whether or not AI created from the bog standard AI, shoved it in, pushed it out, didn't really read it too much.
This is a topic that just deserves an episode in its own right. You mentioned marketers with big budgets and small budgets and playing fields being leveled. What are you doing? You have, I guess, a healthy budget for marketing, or you always a budget for marketing. Whereas a lot of marketers that we've been speaking to, they're kind of one-man team, one-woman team, or one-person team. What are they? Is this, advantage to the little guys, or what's your?
So first of all, let's trade union declaration here. You'll never find a marketer that say they have a big enough budget, right? So every marketer, I think, to the CFO and CEOs listening, I don't have enough marketing budget. I think that's the standard response. I have quite surprisingly small budget. We do a lot of stuff in-house. Yeah. So we've spent more on employees than we've had on going out to agencies or spending a lot on marketing per se. And a lot of the marketing that's available to us in a B2B space is just too expensive. Yeah. So the first thing you need to work out is what's your average order value, your likelihood to sell from this action. And then, that's £30,000 to speak at an event. Like, well, what's our chance of getting a client from that? And how many times can I pay that to speak at an event without going bankrupt? So that's the challenge. When you have a small marketing budget, it forces you to be agile. It forces you to be creative almost. Be creative. I think one of the things we had on the list to talk about was, guerrilla marketing, which is some great examples of that.
We'll go into
later on. But definitely, when you've got a very small marketing budget, you need to be very certain that what you're doing pays off. So you need to have, to the best of your ability, get the data, record stuff. I constantly hear stories of people that do a show and they don't have any way of saying, we went to that show and we met 5 people and 3 of those turned out to be clients. They do the show next year, but they don't know, they're blind.
So repeatable, yeah.
So I've always had that rigor of trying to make sure that from everything we do, can I see what the spend was? Can I see what the result was? What did that work out? Ideally, you'd see that into customer lifetime value, which has its own challenges to get that data. In a B2B world, it's a bit different if you're B2C because the huge numbers, you can see volumes. But in B2B, quite often there's serendipity. So you'll quite often say, hey, we did this year. It didn't work. Worked really well last year. Why is that? Or the other one is there's a temptation sometimes to turn a channel off. But then bang, it gives you 2 clients and suddenly it's paid for the last 3 years. So
we're going to get into the fascinating world of guerrilla marketing and everything else you've mentioned in a bit more detail. But in a short summary, would you be able to say, from your perspective, how do you measure the success of marketing campaigns? Not just necessarily in your role, but from your roles you've had before.
Yeah, so measuring success depends on your objectives. Yeah. So every marketer has different objectives. So if I was marketing for a breast awareness cancer charity, I would want women to be aware that they should go and get screening or prostate cancer or something like that. So, maybe I'm not actually, all I'm kind of trying to work out is you might do an opinion poll in the street, how many people have heard of this, but that's awareness. Other people are looking for leads, other people are looking for free trials, other people looking for just brand awareness, recall. They've already got all the customers they need, they just want them to remember that they are a customer. We're in a world where essentially if I don't fill the sales pipe for my sales team, or their colleagues, not my team, and they don't sell, we will go out of business. So at the end of the day, it really is, did marketing move the needle? Did we bring clients? So I need to evidence that. So I need to be able to say to my boss, I drove, they became clients. And we look at, we always, this wasn't really from the SEO, someone told them about us, this wasn't really from that. But more or less when I can show that the channel delivered, the next question is it scalable?
Yeah.
So that's if we get onto guerrilla marketing, one of the big challenges of guerrilla marketing is the scalability. So the next question is, yes, this worked. This was great to get from A to C, but it won't get us to Z. So you've got to work out, and some channels you can throw as much money at it and it won't give you more than that. So measuring all that, so you've got to measure your different, your different touch points. So you've got your hard conversions, which someone you sold to. You've got your softer conversions down the line, everything from click to, request a demo, were they the right quality? Did sales actually feel confident that you got them the right, even if we didn't close it, did we think we talked to the right person?
Yeah.
So, some of those, I'm like, right, okay, so what we're doing, we didn't get a client, but we talked to the right guy at this insurance company.
It's like this kind of classic battle between MQLs and SQLs. You sometimes you're just not able to kind of prove a return of investment, but it had an impact, and I guess it touches on things like top of mind as well as repetition, and people just literally seeing your logo around and giving that kind of impression of, okay, this is a safe pair of hands, or these people, they seem to be trustworthy. This is completely different and away from what this podcast normally talks about. Breast cancer and prostate cancer. If I've had some people who've had both, and if you're watching this and you want to go and get yourself tested out, completely nothing to do with this, please go and get yourself checked out, because if you catch it early on, then you'll be fine. So nothing to do with marketing, but just a bit of
very good advice. Very good advice.
I don't know if anyone will watch it, but please, if you do, get your parents to go and check it out. So please, this is very important. Away from that, I don't know how we went into that tangent. What has been the most challenging marketing project you've ever worked on, and how did you overcome them?
So I did one. So I've never really kind of been the guy in a garage. I mean, I did help one company start up right from the beginning, but I set up my own company just after my MBA. But I had a technology from a Swedish company. It was already built, but it was basically bootstrapping. Yeah. So that was very interesting. So you're out there. The first thing I learned was straight out of a freshly minted MBA, did all my Excel sheets with all my calculations, how many would sell, what our price would be, and then I didn't realize how long it took to sell. How you had to give discounts off list price, then you had to get paid. That was challenging. So you constantly have to be very close to your market. You have to adapt. And I was working against some very small competitors like Microsoft and Cisco.
Just tiny companies.
Yeah, tiny companies that don't have very aggressive sales teams out there. So that was super interesting. And actually, it taught me a couple of things. One was the value of partnerships very early on, because I was a partner of Apple. I'm going back to 2003. So this wasn't the Apple today. This was the Apple that was happy for me to pay €1,000 to have a corner of their stand because they couldn't afford the full stand.
Or maybe they gave you £1,000 worth of shares, which would have probably been worth £500,000 right now.
But it also taught me the value of. I was on the Apple stands at the Apple Expo with an Apple T-shirt, and came back with 50 or 80 business cards, and I thought, wow, this is easy. And I realized very early on that 50 times 0 is 0. Yeah. So actually, what I realized that from the School of Hard Knocks is actually one good sales lead from an event or an email is much better than 50 bad ones. So
it's quality over quantity. We touched on this just before. Peter, what is guerrilla marketing?
So guerrilla marketing is basically what you do when you don't have much money, or you don't have as much money as your competitors. So I've heard some great examples. I've heard, you go to a big conference, you can't afford to pay for the conferences, or everything's booked out. The breakfasts are really expensive, so people have parked the London bus outside doing, breakfast. So, people turn up, get a free bacon roll. That's a great example. One of the best stories I was told was at a dinner party years ago, an Israeli company that when DVDs first went out, they went off to South Korea and they bought DVDs. They bought millions of DVDs. And then they said, well, how are we going to sell them? So this is when DVDs were just starting. And someone said, oh, you must go to the show in Nice or Cannes or whatever. And so they rang up and they said, no, totally sold out. And so, well, let's at least get a room in the hotel. And they said, well, the only thing we've got is the penthouse. So these guys said, well, everyone's telling us we have to be at the show. We'll take the penthouse. And so what they did was they stood in the reception with a banner saying, after party in the penthouse. And of course, they threw all their budget to free drinks and nibbles. And they sold their entire stock to one guy. I mean, that's a classic example of guerrilla marketing. In my own case, it's a little bit of like, well, I don't have the money to do this big expensive show. How can I get in touch with that person? So, someone thinks we did a lot. People wrote an article in Marketing Week. Quite often, I would email that person saying, Suds, that was a great article you wrote. I really loved that point, and that, bears home on what we do. Interested in learning more. And if I get there quick enough, I'm probably the first person that told you that went public.
Yeah.
Because you're waiting for your PR person to get a message to say that it's gone public. And, you email someone that your article in Marketing Week.
Super relevant.
Super relevant. That's the classic example of guerrilla marketing. Or, you go to a networking event and you see that a guy from this telecoms company is talking. You go in there, you just make an effort to say hi. And, you talk to someone like a human being. You don't just pitch. But you drop in a conversation, what you do, and you agree, I'd love to learn more about that. I was like, well, the funny thing about that is this is the same guy you've been emailing or trying to contact on LinkedIn for months, and you just don't get through.
Yeah.
But that human contact made a difference. That's the kind of guerrilla marketing you can do. The question with guerrilla marketing is scalability.
Yeah.
So it can help you get off the ground. It's often not something you can kind of scale to a multi-billion-dollar business. So I think it's a great. There still are some great examples. There's an example we wrote about in a blog for a Dutch insurance company that created stickers that looked like scratches they put on people's cars. Oh. And so when people came and they saw the scratch, they're jumping in the air, what's going on, they filmed it and they put it on YouTube. And they got, because it was hilarious, they got so many views. And they were a smallish insurance company, but they got millions of views on YouTube.
It's like oversized return for something which would cost very, very little, and it just included a lot of creativity.
But it starts with not having a lot to spend in the first place, right? So that forces you, mother of innovation is necessity. So, when you don't have a lot to spend, you aren't going to a show producer and saying, "Give me the keynote speaker slot at 40,000 or something."
So I guess, guerrilla marketing could be as simple as literally researching, doing your work, and actually approaching someone in a very, very human way. It may not be scalable, but it gets people's attention.
So when if you're starting a business right from the beginning, the first challenge you've got is to get someone to use your product, even if they don't pay for it. Someone can use it, you've got a use case. The next challenge you have to get a few people to pay for it.
Yeah.
So I would say get those, any legal way you can get those people, get them. So, it's guerrilla marketing when you've not got a lot is one of the ways to do it, however you can get the attention of the person that will actually, so if you're looking for investors, the fact you managed to convince X number of companies to use your product, that will help you get investment. There's cash flow, at some point your friends, fools and families money will run out. So you need to get there. So, sitting back saying, I want to put some Google ads out there and let's see what goes on. You need to get there as quick as possible. And any way you can get there legally, ethically.
Within some boundaries. I think that's a very good summary of guerrilla marketing. And also, I guess a lot of our listeners, and especially some of the people we've interviewed in the past, have tried out guerrilla marketing to some degree of success. It's not replicable, but if it goes well, it can go potentially really, really well.
Yeah, and the other thing here is if you've not invested a lot in money and time and it doesn't work, move on. So the thing is when you're in a small company and you have a very finite budget, I always say, and my wife is setting up a business right now, and she said, shall I invest in this? And I said, well, if you invested in that and you got nothing back, would you cry?
Yeah.
And I said, if you cry, then don't do it. So if you could say, right, I spent 1,000 and I learned it doesn't work, move on. then try it. But if you're going to come back and cry and say I lost 1,000, don't do it.
So this is a very interesting follow-up question in terms of, we've asked this to our previous guests before, and in this case, this is actually a real question. So when your wife came to you and said, I'm going to start my own business, did you advise her in marketing?
So in lots of ways. So marketing and my MBA background. So my wife wanted to set up a business. I said two things. Let's think about the presentation you're going to give to a potential client. So let's write that presentation in our mind. So who are you? What problem do you solve? Why are you different? Who's your team? What advantage you've got? How can you sell yourself? Let's look at all the different things you need to be in there, because if you're going to get in front of someone, you're going to have to be able to close it.
Yeah.
The other thing I did was I took my MBA hat on and did the Excel and went through there. And my wife's first reaction was, you're just trying to stop me doing this. And I said, no, I'm trying to show you all the things you need to put in place to make this work. So you can't just go flying in there with, a good idea and, goodwill. And she's an interior designer, so it's not anything I've got anything to do with. So I don't understand. I understand what I've learned by osmosis, but it's not my business at all. But they're kind of those fundamentals. Then to explain things that you could, and tactics like how you can reach out and, connect with people on LinkedIn and what to expect from that and how you keep nurturing them. And she's built a massive LinkedIn audience. She's got, it's interesting, lots of people think she's a much bigger business than she is.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, like sharing. She doesn't listen to everything I say either. It's quite interesting. But, she's got the right to listen and decide, that I want to do that or I can't do that. But it's interesting applying what you've learned and what you know from having studied and having been in that to someone with a real problem, someone with a real situation. You can say, in your shoes, I would do this.
Yeah.
And I can't tell her, it's her business, it's her decision. So, it's free. And then sometimes you find that people will listen to someone they've paid for advice for more than someone that's free, but that's...
the classic adage, people only appreciate things that they pay for.
Yeah.
Which gets me to the next question, actually. A lot of our marketing managers and people we've been speaking to work with the C-suite that doesn't necessarily understand marketing. What advice would you give to them?
So, okay, well, you gave me some advanced knowledge of some of the questions that might turn up here. This was one I was unsure of where you were heading. Because it could actually be your client's C-suite doesn't understand the value of marketing. Yeah. Or it could be your C-suite. So I assume it's your C-suite. Once I had a really interesting conversation with a very, very, very erudite, very experienced gentleman in France, and he told me that he ran loads of businesses, and he told me that every business is something. It's a logistics business, it's a finance business, it's a marketing business, it's an engineering business, it's something, and that blood runs through all its veins. So you have businesses that are marketing businesses by instinct. They were set up by marketing guys. You have other businesses with tech. They were set up by tech guys. And it's hard in any business when that's the prevailing mentality to make a case for. So, some people marketing is almost like those are the kind of guys that fly air balloons around the Wembley Stadium. But if you're in that situation, so if you come from a business where the mindset is marketing, it's a blessing, and it's not always a blessing. It's a blessing in that you've got people that understand the value of marketing. Yeah. The other side of that is people try and second guess you all the time because maybe they've come from marketing background, they've come from marketing businesses. So I've always thought, and sometimes the best combination in a startup would be a really technical guy and a marketing business guy. They don't know each other's businesses, but they trust each other, or woman as well. So you could say, that person isn't going to try and second guess me. If you're in a situation where, it isn't instinctively a marketing business, how do you convince those people to invest in marketing? You need to show value. You need to show, if they're a finance business, you need to get the spreadsheets out and show what marketing brought. You need to show that conclusively. Show actual numbers. If they're a tech business, you need to show how the marketing's helping, get the tech message across. And, and maybe the success of marketing led into sales, which got more tech budget. There's a way to position what you're doing as relevant to that business. So
I think this is an interesting point because Bianca Bass, who was our guest a couple of episodes ago, said more or less the same thing, where you need to speak the language of the C-suite, which they understand, in terms of convincing them to part ways with a budget or trust you to do X, Y, Z. But also I spoke to another marketing director friend of mine, and she was saying she's quite well paid. Can't say how much or who she's working for, but It was like she's a senior hire. She got into the company, and the company just said, "Okay, we've got you. Do your marketing thing." And then she said, "Oh, so what's the budget like?" And they were like, "What budget?" You know, and it was like this kind of thing. Half the battle was, okay, you've hired someone fantastic, but I need the tools to kind of time my labor. So that's very interesting. Another question, you've touched on this before. How do you find partnership opportunities? And I want, the reason I had this question was because a lot of our guests sometimes they overlook partnerships. And
so we have a partnership marketing product, which is, as I mentioned earlier, that if you were trying to market, but leave that aside. Say for a company like Buyapowa, and quite often what happens is a business is growing, you reach a point where you've reached the limit of how you can grow on your own, right? You can write more blogs, you can spend a little bit more on paid search, you can maybe do a few more shows, you can maybe do a bit more content, syndication. You've probably reached your natural limit. But out there are lots of businesses who already do business with your ideal client. So the question is, if I could get those people to talk to their clients, that's just a short circuit to find that person. So that could be in a new industry. It could be just the people I can't get hold of in my current industry I'm working with. It could be in another country. So I'd say it's actually fairly easy to find those companies. So, say if you're working like we do with lots of insurance companies, you might say, well, who are the people that work with insurance companies already? So you can find them. The next thing is you make sure they're not a competitor and they're not in bed with a competitor already. And then you look at, so it's quite often easy to find a person because there's often partnership people, business development people you can find on LinkedIn. They're often very busy. They're often solicited quite a lot. So you need to go with them a kind of sensible proposition. What would we do together? You need to understand what's in it for them, because people generally aren't charities, so another business isn't going to do something for you for free. So you've got to say, well, what can I bring you? Well, if I'm bringing you money, it's probably not that interesting for Google or Microsoft because they have lots of it. But what can I bring you that's cool? Does my technology bring something really cool which works with your technology and gives your clients added value, especially when we can integrate the two? Sometimes agencies say, well, we get quite a lot of kudos for bringing new ideas to our clients. So one of the big questions that marketing's faced over the last few years is what's the future of the agency model? So will agencies become irrelevant? And it was interesting, quite a lot of the agents said, did some surveys of their clients, and they said, well, you're our eyes and ears on the market. So we're focused on our day-to-day job. But actually, if you could go out there and tell us what's going to be the next big thing, you can help us get in there early. So, if you understand what's in it for the other person, the next thing is, you find that person, you get the right idea, get it moving. Then you need to work it. So I talked to the head of partnerships at another SaaS business a couple of years ago, and she gave me a very insightful way that she ran partnerships. So she ran everything A, B, C. So A was high value, but maybe high work. B was maybe not too much work, but low value. C was low value, low work. So she said, you need to sweat it. So with your A's, you spend a lot of time. With your C's, you just leave them. They might bring you a client, but you didn't spend a lot of time. But the A's, maybe you go and develop some software that integrates. Maybe you pay to do a double webinar with them, or maybe you turn up to their internal event and you're on their stand or something. So there's a lot you can do with partnerships. It's easy to find people. You just need to think very carefully what's in it for the partner. What can I propose? And then once you get that, how to manage it, because there's a lot of partnerships have that disappointment factor. On paper it sounded great, but they didn't move the needle, and there's always a reason for that.
For those of you who are watching this in agency land, I spoke to a very senior exited founder, and his advice was essentially, yes, you can add value by, if the company's hired you to do SEO, you can do a good job with that. But if you can go to them and say, hey, here's the next big thing, then that's your job as an agency, because no marketer is complete. They're looking for ideas that they can go to their boss with and look good in front of them, or bring something that's innovative that no one's heard of. So it's almost like agencies, people who are in agencies, their responsibilities to actually bring new ideas to the table. One thing I want to we've got a whole load of questions, but I just want to quickly just pick your brains on this. Ideal customer personas, and how often should a company revisit them? firstly, how do you identify them, and how often should you revisit them?
Again, it depends entirely on the business you're in. So if you work in huge B2B, like aerospace or something, there's probably a very small number of buyers that could buy your product. You may know the names, actually personally know all the people you've got to sell to. So it's a bit different. You go to the other end, you go to high volume consumer, impossible. So you have to create personas and use them. In the middle, anything in the middle between those, it's a kind of, so what are you doing? Some companies, everything they do is, how would Claire view this? Claire is our housewife, age 35, 2 children, divorced, part-time job, reads this newspaper, goes on holiday to Crete, does this kind of stuff. Her problems in life are this. And you think about, did we write stuff? Did we create a product that addressed her needs and her fears and is it in her language? So you can do that. We have a slightly, personally at the moment, we have a slightly looser, because we tend to know that, so we get a lot of feedback. So if you want to create a persona, you need to get feedback from all the antenna that your company has. Yeah. So you can get published research, you can get, click data from analytics, you can get research report by this and that. You can do your own research, focus group surveys. But the people that talk to your customers day in, day out are your salespeople, your customer support, all those people. And that's, if you get that feedback into whether it's a persona. I mean, I've worked in business, we did personas, and we sat down with the sales guys on phones, and we got them, said, what you're going to do is you're going to imagine the person you speak to day in, day out, and you're going to give them a name, an age, and they loved it. They filled in, one of them filled in like 5 or 6 of these, and we went through, and then we grouped them, and then we found, and we created them. The person who used them most was the training department, because they used them to train the new customer service agents.
I see.
So we used them, but we didn't use them as religiously as I thought we would. In a kind of B2B business, we always talk about, in a looser extent, so we haven't named the person. We talk about, so this is the kind of job title, this is the kind of concerns I've got. Is the content we're doing, is the positioning we've got, does it address those? So it makes sense, but you need to be constantly getting feedback in. And if you're trying to do it, just with some Hitwise reports and stuff, you're probably wrong. You need to talk to the people that talk to your customers.
It's almost like having you've got your people in-house, and they're probably the best feedback loop that you can do to revisit your personas. Another really quick one, 2 things really. Attending, how do marketers go about public speaking at large events? I know you've done a few of these. Any tips?
So I could do a whole podcast on that, right? I've done so many.
I think we met at a talk event when you spoke. Actually.
Yeah, quite possibly. So I've done everything from TV, radio, small events, huge events. I've done them in other languages too. So if you're preparing for a talk, I'd say, basically we all have what God gave us, right? So we've got, I have quite a monotone but quite a strong voice and quite a large physique. You have to work with what you've got. You've got to feel comfortable. So, whether you like to sit, stay still, or you like to walk about. Our CEO is a great speaker. He walks up and down the stage, and I'm quite often, oh my God, he's walked out the light again. So, I walk about a bit. I like to have, normally I might have a PowerPoint, but I don't read what's on the PowerPoint. It's my aide-memoire. So if I get to a point where that's what I need to get back onto. So the main thing is prepare. Talk about something you know about, right? Don't do someone else's speech. It's the worst thing you can ever do. Talk to people. Talk a little bit like it's a conversation. Yeah. Definitely. The other thing is just do it. Do as much public speaking as you can do. The better you'll get. My wife's doing Toastmasters at the moment, so she's going through that, learning that. It's quite interesting hearing what they're teaching her. But the main thing they're teaching her is just do more and more and more, which is exactly what you need to do. So. I wasn't a natural speaker by any means. The first time I ever spoke at school, I held the table fiercely and shook. But doing it more and more, even informally in the office with 6 people, it just became more natural. And if you see yourself being filmed, it's actually quite interesting because you see the tics you've got, and you see what you don't look at the audience, you don't you don't project. The other thing is you see actors. Actors do lots of exercises before they go on stage to clean out the lungs. The classic Shakespearean actor with 2 hands on the side and the legs apart to get the chest
power
up.
Position, I think.
Power position, yeah. So, but all of those things help. But the best thing you should do is just do it. Do as many as you can.
Practice, and as in tips for approaching organisers. Would you, I guess opportunities come to you? But when you first started off, did you reach out to these guys or
to talk at events? So it's interesting. So I speak less at events these days for a couple of reasons. At different times, I was at more innovative startup businesses. There were a couple of social networks, for example. So everyone wanted to hear about social. And when you're at startups, there's lots of really good startup events, which we've long outgrown being a startup.
Yep.
So those cheap or free events have kind of vanished. The other thing we have, we're blessed in our business, so we have 3 or 4 or 5 very good public speakers. So notably our CEO, our head of brands, our head of partnerships. So quite often I'm number 4 in the list. So,
well, that takes some doing for you. You're an accomplished public speaker, so these guys must be amazing.
They're good. They're good. That's one of our strengths as a business. We've got lots of people that if you put them on a stage, they're very good. We're all different. We've got different ways of speaking. Yeah. We'll do it differently. But I mean, it's one of the blessings. I mean, we're in a marketing-led business mostly.
I mean, I think I was reading probably one of the most difficult books. It was very, very wordy. It was Cicero's A Good Life, and his thesis was anyone, no matter who you are, what you're doing. This is written hundreds of years ago. His thesis was public speaking is how you motivate people, connect with people emotionally, and if you're good at public speaking, you pretty much do anything you want.
So if you want to be a leader in a business, I think you need to be able to do public speaking. I always said that the worst moment for a CEO of a big company is the lift. Yeah. Because they get in the lift and they don't know any of the employees, and the employee knows who they are. So, but if you want to create, and you unfortunately you can't spend an hour with every employee once you get over a certain size. But if you want to have some kind of relationship with your employees, you need to speak, and you need to inspire, and you need to show, as not just be I'm the master of the universe, but humility and understand your concerns, and we're in this together, and communicating that can really motivate your team. So the other thing is, if you want to get people to invest in your business, you want to get people to buy your product, public speaking is essential, and that can be podcast like this. It could be standing on a stage. Yeah. It could be just sitting around a table with 3 or 4 people.
I mean, Peter, someone such as myself, this is my medium into the audience that we're trying to target, and getting you in was essentially, trying to add some more credibility and authenticity to this. So, those things I completely agree with. Next up, and I'm conscious because we have so much to cover, this is for anyone who's looking to enter a foreign market. You've done it before. What are the top 3 tips?
So I've done both. I've done taking French businesses into the UK. I've tried to take UK businesses outside. The first thing I'd say is employ local staff. Yeah. Employ people that know the market, speak the language, understand the culture. Culture is so important. People don't buy the same way in different countries.
The
nuances. What are buying signals? Do they expect you to do this? Will they only buy from people to show commitment to their market? So I ran a business in France, and I was told very early on, hey, you're another French guy, and French guys have been bitten before because they bought product from an American company. We're here for the long term, and they closed the office next year. So now we've got to phone Austin, Texas, and speak to an English guy, so an American guy. So that's really important. The other one is use your network. Try and find, again, non-competing, but businesses that have done it before. Our CEO is very good at that. Get battle stories, people that say, we did this, didn't work, or you need to understand this. Then some fundamentals, look at the market, right? How big is the market? You go into a country and you say, oh, well, there's only 3 million people and the GDP is only this, and why didn't we sell very much? If you thought about that before, maybe you wouldn't have gone in that market. So there is some fundamental you need to do, but I'd say talk to people who've been there, get local people and do a bit of fundamental research.
So it's almost like before you even get out of the gate, you've got to do your homework, make sure you're on point with everything you're doing, and then when you do approach a country, or when you land, when your feet's in the ground, then you actually tap into local resources and networks of people that you're kind of getting into. 2 things, 2 last things before we get into our rapid fire questions. What is gamification?
So gamification essentially is using game elements, fun elements in a business scenario. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get people to engage with something, to do something, to do it now, and to do it again. So it could be there's a chance to win a prize, or the best person gets this prize, or if you hit this threshold, you get something. So the idea is using all those kind of things, psychological tips, tools, like FOMO, fear of missing out. you got a chance to win this, you got a chance to do that, but only if you do it before the end of December. So we've, as a business, we began in social commerce, so we use lots of gamification. So as a business, we use things like tiered rewards. So you hit a milestone, you'll get an extra reward. We do short booster campaigns for our clients. We did a great one with TELUS in Canada years ago where they said, within these 2 months, if you can refer someone and they complete inside 2 months, we'll not only give you 50 Canadian, we'll give your friend 50 Canadian, we'll give 50 Canadian to a homeless charity.
Oh, wow.
So there was a bit of, fear of missing out on the opportunity. Sometimes we've done leaderboards. We did some great leaderboard prizes years ago, which was backstage passes to Ed Sheeran and the Who concerts. Oh. So the top.
Do you still have some of them going?
Fortunately not. Unfortunately not.
I think the most famous gamification campaign that has, it gets talked about in marketing circles is Box, which was like the Dropbox equivalent, where if you share your Box, campaign with your account with someone, you get a referral link, and if they also sign up, you get 50 extra megabytes or something like that. And I think I sent my referral link to like everyone I knew. It's very similar to Dropbox, did the same thing, and there's quite a lot of literature about that. So Dropbox one was very, very interesting, very well thought out. Yeah. Because you as a user of Dropbox, you would get more utility if your friend also had Dropbox, because you could share files and photos and things with them. So you offering some free storage to your friend made sense, but you'd already bought into the utility of that, so they gave you extra storage. So that's one of the use cases everyone writes about how referral can build a business and mushroom the business. But they got a lot of things right. And the other key thing about that was marginal cost was almost zero, because it was giving someone another couple of gigabytes of storage, when they had millions of gigabytes. It's almost like, if you've already got an advocate, you may as well get the best out of them, because they're going to talk to their friends and family about their products. Another interesting example is, I think, Airbnb and Uber. When they first started off, you get a referral code, you get £10 off your first ride, and that's how they kind of get you started. I want to get into the rapid fire questions, because you're a very well-read man, Peter. What are 3 must-read books?
It's difficult to give 3. I think some of the classic books, Good to Great is always good.
Yep.
Blue Ocean. I'm actually reading one of the later Blue Ocean sequels. I read a book years ago on Google Analytics Consolidated, which actually was one of the best books I ever read on Google Analytics. I'm hoping to do the same for GA4. Some other ones are really interesting. One I bought because people on Amazon, someone who bought this, and I bought it without really looking at it. And I got it was something called influencer marketing, something like that. I can send you the title when I'm back home and I can see it. And I got the book. It was written in 1953. Oh, wow. And it was quite thin. And my disappointment was like, what will I learn from someone in 1953? Actually, it was an amazing book. So the whole premise of the book was, by 1945, every American had everything they ever needed. They had boots that last them a lifetime, a car that lasts them a lifetime, washing machine that lasts a lifetime. How the marketing industry got people to throw out perfectly good washing machines and perfectly good clothes. It's called fashion. It's called making people feel embarrassed at having an old washing machine. The only thing that was strange was also we're seeing the names of the companies, because I think everything else was still directly applicable. But of course, they quite often, talk about this company's long gone, So, but that was a great book.
I guess Apple are probably the masters of this, where every year, this is the newest and the bestest phone you can have, and it makes you want to throw your phone straight into the bin and buy the new one. I'm a sucker for it.
Yeah. Another book that I found really interesting is Powerful, which is the book about the HR woman who helped Netflix grow, which is really interesting, seeing a growth story through the eyes of an HR person. And she talked very much about how they realized that certain people were very good for a certain stage in the business, but weren't good to take them on. Yeah. And that what they did was they were very upfront with those people, and they helped them exit with good package. It was done in a kind of nice way. They let people know that you're probably not the right person for the next stage in our development, but you're going to leave with a packet of stock options. So that was very interesting reading that, and just because you quite often hear it from the perspective of the founder, not HR.
I think there's I don't know if this is a book title, if this is an article I read which said, "What got you here won't get you there." And this is, I talk to a lot of VC-funded businesses where the initial hire of hipsters, hucksters, and something else. I can't remember. Mine's gone blank. They can get the business from kind of bootstrap to funding, but then the same essential keys and skills, key skills, won't carry them to Series A to Series B, B to Series C.
So yeah, when I did my MBA, I did an entrepreneurship specialization in it. It was quite interesting. It's an interesting debate as whether you can teach entrepreneurship. But there's a lot of books like Crossing the Chasm that talk a lot about that. And often it's the quirky. I mean, the Steve Jobs, I understand, was a very, very difficult character. Very, very difficult person.
All read his book.
Yeah, but I've met people that have, they've sat in a dinner next to him and he didn't say a single word to them for a full 3-course dinner. Oh, wow. So a lot of those people that set up businesses, really innovative ideas, are quirky. They're innovative. They're often asocial. They're not good managers, but they're futures gazers, and they're great at getting a company off the ground, but they're not good managers. So often a lot of VCs would say, yeah, we need to manage that person out, and what I understand that in Silicon Valley, they have a better view. They see that they don't want to, throw that person out with nothing. They try and make sure that person leaves with something. So they know that person will go back and create another business and feed them again. So I understand, I'm maybe a bit out of date on this, but I understand it wasn't as similar in Europe, where people tend to think, hey, and off you go.
It's like, training someone who's always been in B2C and expecting them to suddenly sell to enterprises. There is an adjustment period. People can adjust and be trained up, but the skill sets needs to be trained up and I guess honed in so they can find their true passion in something else.
So there's lots of little things like being able to delegate. Yeah. So if you are a founder, you've maybe been every single decision went through you, giving up that power. The other one is sometimes some of those people are very irascible. Yeah. And doesn't work very well having a personality like that in a big company with HR, etc. So
a friend of mine, probably the most brilliant man I know, he's my best friend. He's a PhD from a top tier university. He's amazing at what he does. He's a mathematician or physicist. There's beef between them, so I don't know what he likes to call himself. But he's a numbers man. He's brilliant. He's got a PhD, but he's just not able to manage people because it's just not his thing. Yeah. He's not wired up to do that. Whereas give him a developer tool, give him an issue, give him a problem, he'll be able to solve it straight away. I know we kind of spoke about this off air. People you follow, people who inspire you.
So I've never been someone who follows people. So I know everyone will say Elon Musk. I personally think the guy's a megalomaniac. And I have a lot more admiration sometimes for the local business person that sets up a local business, provides employment in a backwater town, and goes through all of the problems of interest rate hikes and banks that suddenly won't lend to them, or losing a key supplier, that kind of stuff. And sometimes those are my heroes, the nameless people like that. So I don't follow one person, but I tend to be kind of smorgasbord. I drop in and I read stuff from someone. Stuff filters up to me, so obviously read things or I see things on the internet and I'll read from, that person. I enjoyed their blog or quite interesting ideas, but I've never been a religious follower of one person.
So it's more like characteristics and personality types that you kind of admire.
Yeah, it's something that I think you can take something from everyone. You can take even some of the most inspiring conversations I've had have been with people that run a small business and nothing to do with what I do. It's people that told me they started on their kitchen table with a telephone, and set up a business now worth X million. So I find that much more inspiring than someone who spent billions of VC money. So
it's like easy mode and hard mode. We spoke about a lot of key things. Are there any final words that you want to leave our wonderful and beautiful audience with?
No, I think we've talked a lot about the challenges of being in marketing, and obviously, a few years under my belt already, I'm quite often given the challenge of trying to mentor or advise people that want to get into marketing. And it's interesting. I always say, well, look, you need to have a passion for what you're doing. So, and the other one is that passion should be just more than your 9 to 5. So when you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work. So you shouldn't feel fine, I've quit work, I'm on gaming or I'm off rollerblading, whatever. But actually, the fact that you're interested in what you do, you see something, you think, that could be. So if you have a natural passion for it, that's something I think that leads you, you're in the right direction. The other one is lifelong learning. Continue learning. in any way you can. You can learn, and it can be formal, informal. You don't necessarily need to spend a lot. Loads of free education online, loads of great education from Google, loads of great education in blogs. People will write, very detailed, or forums. People will give you like, how do I do this? Some guy's gone in there and put, this is the way to do it. So those are two of the key things I say, always be passionate, always be learning, always be curious.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Peter. We have enjoyed learning so much from your career, from when you first started off to now, and things have changed a lot, and things will change, and I think that's the only certainty we can have as human beings.
Yeah, agree. Thanks.
Thank you again, and please join us at the next one.